So I do wear a lot of hats, but of late I've been focusing my intellectual work on fictional ideas in philosophy. And I think a lot of us tend to think about fiction, about stories, as fun, as entertainment primarily. And good stories are fun, and they should be. But good stories can also be a lot more than that. And this is because good authors, the people who create the good stories, are people who look out at other people. They look out at the world. They observe things. They're constantly observing things. And then when they go to create their stories, they condense what they observe into a character, into a situation, into a theme which will run throughout their work. All of these observations are contributing to what makes a character memorable, a story good, etc., etc. But there are some stories that do even more than that. They have character arcs that are deliberately developed by the author for a specific purpose. And these, I think, are especially useful to look at and to learn from. Success, okay. So what specifically is a character arc? In broad terms, it's a character's change throughout a story. A lot of times we think of this in terms of a good change. If you look up character arc on Google Images, you'll get something like this. Protagonist starts off one way, encounters challenges, undergoes realizations, and ends up transformed. That is a character arc, but it is specifically a positive character arc, a growth character arc. There are also negative character arcs. Change unfortunately, does not necessarily have to be for the good. You could have a decay arc. If you think about Anakin Skywalker in the prequel Star Wars trilogies, where he's becoming Darth Vader, that is a decay arc. There are also knowledge arcs, where either the character is learning something throughout the course of the story. If you know Atlas Shrugged, Dagny Taggart goes through a knowledge arc, or we are learning about the character throughout the course of the story. Staying with Atlas Shrugged, is John Galt would be an example of this. Or if you wanted to go to Harry Potter, Professor Snape. He doesn't change throughout the story. How we look at him does, because we learn more about him. So these are all valid types of character arcs. They all have their place in storytelling. But they're not the kinds of arcs that we're going to focus on today. We are going to stick to the growth arcs. And in a growth arc, a character needs to change in order to meet a challenge. It's not just a change for no reason. It's not just a change because the character needed to do something. There's a challenge. The character changes in order to meet the challenge. This has some overlap with the hero's journey, but it's not the same thing. So that I can gauge how well you guys know this, can I see a show of hands if you are very confident that you know what the hero's journey is? Oh, okay. Only a few hands. So hero's journey, the term originated with Joseph Campbell, who wrote a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And what he was doing in that book was looking back at mythology and old stories and saying, what do these heroes have in common? What is the story structure that all of these stories share? And this was termed the hero's journey and has since served as something of a blueprint for heroes going forward. Where it is sometimes different from a character arc is that a hero's journey has the hero facing challenges and overcoming them, but the hero doesn't necessarily have to change his or her character, his or her fundamental essence in order to reach those challenges. The character may only need to gather certain knowledge or skills in order to meet their challenges. If we go back to Star Wars, we could think of Luke Skywalker, who I don't think is a great hero, but nevertheless, he doesn't change fundamentally as a person, he just learns how to be a Jedi. Same thing with Harry and Harry Potter. He doesn't change fundamentally as a person. He is ready to fight Voldemort from the time he is 11. Like, there's not a fundamental change there. What changes is his skills, his knowledge. He matures a little bit over the course of, becoming 17, but fundamentally, he does not change. He goes through a hero's journey rather than a growth character arc. These do sometimes overlap, but that is the key difference between the two. So if the stages of the character arc are sounding like the hero's journey, which maybe I overassumed familiarity there, but there's an overlap, but they're not always the same. But why study character arcs? Why do I think these are so valuable that I have planned an entire talk to explain them to you? To answer that, I think we first need to step back a little bit and say, now, what is the purpose of art? What does art do? And fundamentally, art is something that takes abstract ideas, love, courage, justice, friendship, and embodies them. If you were in Africa's talk yesterday, she was talking about our values, and they can be embodied values or desired values. What an artist does is takes a value and gives it a body. Creating a form that is perceptual. It's something you can see, hear, look at. maybe more than one of those things, depending on the art form. And that, if it's done well, that creates a form of this abstraction that for you is vivid, is memorable. You can think of a particular type of person or a particular abstraction, and this character will hop into your brain. One that I hear a lot from some people is that if they think about a character who has a misguided idea of justice, they think of Javert from Les Miserables. These really lifelike, vivid characters who are memorable because they make you feel something and because they are such a condensed version of what they are. They do not have accidents or chance that is interfering with their characters in a good work of art. They are just an integrated, condensed example of the thing. So this makes them really valuable. They are valuable as examples, as things we can refer to, as inspiration. And as we'll see, if a character is going through a character arc, then they become an embodiment of the lesson that they learn through that arc, if it's a growth arc. And specifically, if you have an integrated work of fiction, you have a character arc, at least some of the main characters' arcs, will embody a theme or an aspect, the theme of the work, or an aspect of the theme of the work. And we'll see how this works as we go through. For each work that we're talking about, I'll give you the theme, and we'll see what lessons the characters learn and how they connect or overlap. But to give you an example of what I mean by a theme, the theme of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged is the role of man's mind in existence. Everything in that book is intended to convey that theme. Now, if you are familiar with the book at all, you know it's like 1,000 pages. It's massive. It's got 30 chapters. I've read a reading group on it. We broke down the characters. I had a document where I was studying the characters. We were looking at what the characters were like and how we knew, and that document is 24 pages long. There's a lot going on in that story, but all of it is intended to illuminate, illustrate, show some element of this theme. A lot of what I'm saying will apply to some extent to other forms of art as well. Movies, TV shows, to a lesser extent painting, sculpture, even video games could be an example of this, but I'm focusing on literature, but just bear that in mind that a lot of this will apply to other things also. Especially, for example, the fact that they all have a theme. And the purpose of bringing up this theme is that if we look at a work of art and we explicitly identify what the theme is, if we try to say, what is this art showing us about the creator's view of existence, then we can do a couple of things. We can we can explore that theme as to whether the artwork is bearing it out, is making it convincing or less so, and we can also evaluate whether this work of art is a life-serving work of art or not. Is the theme something that is good for human life, that is in line with the requirements of human life? Or is it a negative, destructive theme? And we are going to focus on, for the rest of this presentation, growth arcs, which I've already said, but growth arcs that are set in books with life-serving themes. I think you'll see why as we go through, but it's basically so that we are focusing on lessons that are tied into themes that are good for human life, that are going to help us improve our lives. And if we look at character arcs and we study them deliberately in this way, I think we can do two main things. One is we can learn the specific lessons that the characters are learning. Well, I'll give you examples of these, as I said, as we go through. But whatever it is, if they're learning something that's related to a life-serving idea, we want to learn that thing, right? But I think also if we step back and look at the structure of a character arc, if we look at what goes into a character arc, what character arcs have in common, we can start to create them in our own lives. We can start to look at people and situations and challenges and things and say, I'm going to make this part of my growth arc. I'm going to make this an opportunity to improve myself and to improve my life. So this is the plan for the rest of the talk. I'm going to break down the stages for you. I'm going to go a little bit quickly because I'm then going to break it down again and again and again in the 3 examples. And from each of those examples, I will pull out the lesson, compare it to the theme, and pull out a couple of points that I just really want you guys to focus on to highlight that I think will help with this process. The examples will be Lizzie Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, Hank Rearden from Atlas Shrugged, and Neville Longbottom from Harry Potter. In the case of the first 2, I will not spoil the ending, so if you haven't got all the way to the end, don't worry, it's okay. In the case of Harry Potter, I will spoil the end of Neville's arc, but if you've only seen the movies, it is also okay. You will be fine to follow along. And the point of using these 3, besides the fact that I think they're all phenomenal works of fiction with lots of great ideas and lots of great value, but they're from different eras in different genres, and I wanted to make the point that those things are not relevant when we're talking about life-serving themes and good character arcs. You can find them in any genre and any era, from any, well, not from any author, from lots of authors across literature. And then we'll wrap up with a few takeaways to hopefully help you apply this a little bit more to your life. So these are, I'm gonna break this down fairly quickly, but not too quickly. There's no like one set, these are the stages of a character arc that you must use. There are a lot of different breakdowns. I've seen anywhere from 3 to 12 steps. We're gonna use 7 steps because I think most well fleshed out character arcs do have all of these 7 steps. And it's enough that we can get into it in some depth, but not so much that you couldn't possibly remember it. That said, I'm gonna go through it a little bit quickly because we're gonna go through it again and again and again. Before I start actually talking about them though, I will say also, one of the benefits of literature is we can see the character's external world and to some extent also the character's internal world. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they going through? And this is important because we all live this way too. We have people we're talking to, things we're doing, stuff that's going on in the outside world around us. We also have our thoughts and our feelings. We experience the world as both of those things. So it's helpful to have a character arc in which we can see both of those things. We can see the internal world and the external world. So the purple text throughout the presentation will be outside the external world. The black text will be the internal world. That will stay consistent throughout my entire presentation. Okay, with that said, so the first step is the initial state. What is the situation? What is the context? What's going on with the character when we start the story? And internally, that looks like, sorry, should I move so y'all can take pictures? Okay. Internally, that's gonna look like limited awareness. Whatever the problem is, the character is either not at all aware of it or not really aware of it. They're not really knowing that there's a problem just yet, right at the beginning. Then something happens, some catalyst, they meet somebody, something happens, something changes in their situation. This is the catalyst. And this leads to some kind of increased awareness. They're now, to some extent, aware of the problem or aware of whatever the challenge is going to be. But change is hard. So then comes resistance and struggle. And depending on the kind of challenge that it is, there may be some external problems that make it harder. It may be mostly internal struggles. Ideally, with a really good integrated work of fiction, you have some of both. Then, depending on the length and complexity of the work, you will have either one test or perhaps more than one test that puts the character through a bunch of challenges and they have to try and get through that. At some point in that process, they commit to change. And we'll see examples of this, like I say, going through, but there will be a point at which they deliberately say, I need to do this differently. And that happens in stage 4. And in order to get there, there's some amount of self-reflection, some amount of learning, and that can be really, really instructive and really philosophic in the right hands. Then comes the action. If you're looking at a genre like sci-fi or fantasy, this will usually be some kind of like big battle or something. In other genres, it might be a little bit more subtle, but there's some big thing through which the most important thing is we see that the character has changed. We see his or her transformation. They're putting their new character trait to work. Then there's the fallout from that. Because we're talking about growth arcs, these are going to be positive things. Maybe external rewards, maybe consequences, maybe some kind of emotional reward, maybe they're proud of themselves, whatever it is, some positive outcome that results from that. Now in real life, even if we are working on ourselves, we make a change, we have a big challenge we deal with, that's not it. Like Eli was saying in the previous talk, it's not like you reach virtue and you're just there. You have to keep doing it over and over again. And over time it becomes easier because it becomes part of you, it becomes habituated. But very often there's still some struggles where you have to really try again. And in a character arc, we call that a resurrection. Or a final attempt. You have to really push through one more time before the author's like, okay, now they've got it, now we're good, now we're gonna carry on. And at that point, we're at the new state. This is what I will not spoil for the first two, because that would just not be fun if you don't know the story. All right, like I said, don't stress if you haven't gotten this. These names will be on every slide that they apply to. So our first example, this is Lizzie Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. She's the second oldest of 5 daughters. She's the daughter of a gentleman, so she's got a certain social status, but they're not very wealthy. The daughters are not going to be able to inherit the estate, and this leaves them with a problem, because this is early 19th century England. It's not socially acceptable to work. They don't have any skills that they could work for. Basically, their only option is to marry wealthy. Lizzie does not want to marry for money. She wants to marry for love. She wants to have a happy life. But she's not rushing. Even though they live in a small town, there aren't a lot of eligible bachelors. Her mom is very overbearing. You kind of see where she's coming from, that she wants her daughters to have a good, comfortable, stable life, but she's very overbearing. She's very direct and over the top, and sometimes even borderline rude in social contexts. But Lizzie finds the things that she likes in her life. She's very close to her older sister. She likes to read. She likes to go for walks. She's, I would say, generally pretty content at the beginning of the story. She's not rushing to get married or anything like that. And then the catalyst happens. I said they lived in a small town with few eligible bachelors. 2 eligible bachelors arrive into town. They're both very wealthy, one more so than the other. They're both very handsome, and they show up to a ball. One of them is very friendly and kind of falls in love right away with her older sister, Jane. The other one is Mr. Darcy. Mr. Darcy is very standoffish, kind of arrogant, and he specifically scorns Lizzie. His friend is telling him, "You've got to go dance with people, Mr. Darcy, like have a good time." And Mr. Darcy's like, "No, I don't want to dance, this is not for me. It would be intolerable to dance with any of these ladies." And his friend is like, "There are so many pretty girls here, dance with one." No, Mr. Darcy's not having it. He looks at Lizzie and says, she is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me. Of course, the problem is Lizzie could hear him. So she is quite offended, but rather laughs it off, because that's Lizzie's character. She's kind of fun and playful, and she likes to laugh at people being stupid or silly. So this is, in terms of increased awareness, this is sort of an interesting case, because she's not yet aware of the problem, but this is the incident through which she will become aware of the problem. We have to meet Mr. Darcy in order for her to start on her journey. Then throughout the rest of the work, not the rest of the work, but the next third or so, we have the situation where Lizzie is growing to dislike Mr. Darcy more and more and more. There are different things that happen. The most dramatic of them is that she hears a lie about Mr. Darcy. She hears something that she believes, even though she doesn't know the person telling it very well, that would put him as a very immoral person. The next time they're at a dance together, Mr. Darcy does ask Lizzie to dance, and Lizzie says no. She's really kind of pushing back. She's hesitant. She doesn't want to get involved with him. She starts to dislike him more and more. He even convinces the friend who is falling in love with her older sister to leave town because he doesn't think that it would be a good match for them, which obviously leaves her sister heartbroken, and Lizzie, being very close to her sister, is very upset about this. So throughout the course of the next several chapters, Lizzie is starting to dislike Mr. Darcy more and more. Mr. Darcy is kind of trying to make amends a little bit in his own way, and Lizzie completely oblivious to this. She does not notice at all. He corrects other people's rudeness to her. He asks her to dance, like I mentioned a couple of times, and she's just like, what could this possibly mean? And then goes right on with her life. And then come the tests and committing. In this case, it is just one test. And it comes after Mr. Darcy proposes to Lizzie. Like I say, Lizzie has been completely oblivious to the fact that Mr. Darcy is interested in her, and he does, to be fair, propose in a very rude way, in which he basically insults her family, says, "You guys are way beneath me, but for whatever reason, I still love you, so will you marry me?" And she unsurprisingly says no. And when he asks, "Well, why don't you like me?" she explains to him the things that she thought were either not great in his behavior, or then the lie that she had heard about him, all of these things that had set her against him. And so Mr. Darcy writes her a letter in which he tries to explain the two big things that were wrong, why he convinced his friend to leave town, and the lie about his previous behavior that would have, if it were true, it would have meant he's very immoral. This is Lizzie's big test. She has the evidence on the table. What is she going to do with it? And what she does with it is she thinks it over very seriously. At first she's like, this can't be true. This is just so wrong. And then she realizes, no, actually, if I think back over the behavior of the people involved, I didn't have enough evidence to make the judgment about the claim about Mr. Darcy. I was completely flattered by one, I was offended by the other, and so I was inclined to believe the one that had flattered me over the other one. Specifically, she says that she had, from the very beginning of their acquaintance, she had courted prepossession, which is another word for prejudice, and ignorance, and driven reason away where either was concerned. And she commits, in this moment, Jane Austen writes these lovely scenes for most of her heroines, where they have this moment of, oh no, I've screwed up. I need to do better. And it's a very thorough, thoughtful understanding of their mistakes and what they need to change. And Lizzie has that moment. And she has the chance to put it into action when she meets Mr. Darcy again. She meets him by accident. After the failed proposal, she expects never to see him again, but she does. She accidentally runs into him. And she is so determined to both be nicer to him and be more clear-eyed about his behavior, but also to take into account the fact that the people closest to him, his sister, the housekeeper who'd known him since he was 4 years old, these people have a very high regard for him that does not match what she had thought about him before. So she's trying to be nicer, trying to be more clear-eyed. Mr. Darcy, too, goes through a bit of an arc, and he is behaving a bit differently by this stage, but we don't get as much of Mr. Darcy's internal processes, which is why I focused on Lizzie, but there is a nice little double character arc there. And I will not tell you how that ends, because if you haven't read it, it would be no fun. But the theme of the work overall is that you need to be focused on reality. You need to keep your mind connected to what is actually going on if you want to be happy. If you want to live a good life, if you want to find the right partner, if you want to make the right decisions, you need to be focused on what is actually going on in reality. And the lesson that Lizzie learns, which is a part of that, is you cannot let prejudice blind you to the facts, again, if you want to be happy, if you want to find the right relationships. One of the things I noticed when I was preparing for this presentation is that there's very often a push and a pull factor. Something that's nudging the character, gently or not so gently as the case may be, toward doing better, and something that's enticing them, something that's a reward. If you succeed in this way, you might have this thing. And in Lizzie's case, the push is the evidence from Mr. Darcy, the just flat out this is incorrect. And the pull is the romance, the fact that there is a potential relationship there, and there's something about Mr. Darcy that appeals to her despite her initial dislike of him. And her key opportunity for change is Mr. Darcy's letter. If she had disregarded that, if she had looked at that and said, well, I don't like him, so I'm not going to pay any attention to it, she would never have gone through the change that she did. So that was our first example. Next, we have Hank Rearden from Atlas Shrugged. Hank is not the main character, but he's an important character. And when we meet him, he is a very successful businessman. He owns many steel-related industries, ores, mines, mills, that kind of thing, or mining mill places. Anyway, and he has just invented, when we first meet him, a new metal. He calls it Rearden metal. It's supposed to be cheaper and lighter and stronger than steel. And so he should be ecstatic. And at first he is, when he's at work seeing this metal being poured. But then he goes home. And then we realize that he is, in fact, very lonely, and he actually reflects on the fact that he feels loneliest when he is happy, when he's had some achievement. And this is because of his family. He lives with his wife, his mother, and his brother. And all of them have these expectations for him that he behave in a certain way, that he give them certain things, even though they don't actually care about him. They don't care about the things that he cares about. In fact, they tell him sometimes that he is a terrible person, a terrible brother, a terrible husband. And he just kind of looks at this and is like, well, they must be right. I know what I'm doing at work, but when it comes to this kind of thing, the feelings, the people, it's not my thing. I'm not so good at that. So they must be right. This is how we meet him. He kind of has a double catalyst, but the first one is meeting Francisco d'Anconia at a party. Francisco is from an aristocratic family, but he's very wealthy, he's very productive, but he's initially early in life, and then he turns into a playboy. And so Hank has a pretty bad opinion of him. He's like, you don't work, you just waste your money, being promiscuous and doing all these awful things. But Francisco, when he meets him, thanks him for his achievements. He offers him gratitude, and he encourages him to think about who is profiting, who is benefiting from his work. At first, the honesty and the gratitude completely shock Hank, and he's kind of startled into this vulnerable position. But then he remembers what he knows about Francisco, and he rejects Francisco's friendship, and he says, no, you're a terrible guy, we're not going to be friends. Thanks, but no thanks, effectively. Then comes his relationship with Dagny Taggart, and this results from the two of them working together on a professional endeavor. They've known each other in a professional context for some time. They succeed, they have a massive success of their first test, and they begin an affair, they sleep together. And It's a celebration of their victory, but at the same time, Hank feels that it's wrong. He's cheating on his wife, so in a sense it is wrong. And he condemns them both for it. And he has this, you can see his intense struggle, his emotions fighting with one another, because on the one hand, he knows that Dagny is the kind of person that he wants in his life. On the other hand, he feels this duty to his wife. Okay, good. Then come a series of tests for Hank, a number of things in his personal and professional life that make things more difficult, where he has to be constantly dealing with these direct challenges to the things he cares about most. A few of them, the government tries to get him not to sell, or to stop him from selling his steel to the people he wants to sell it to, his metal rather. They blackmail him a couple of times. His wife learns about his affair and demands that he stop it, and then learns who it's with and demands even more so that he stop, and he refuses. And Dagny goes missing after a period in which they've really been falling in love, and he's been seeing how much Dagny loves her life and how she is an integrated person. She has this kind of inner peace no matter what's going on around her, because she knows what she stands for, she knows what she wants, and she knows what she's going to do about it. And being able to absorb those lessons from Dagny, especially about having the same kind of standards, the same kind of approach to her personal life and her work, leads him to realize that he deserves better, personally. That he can, if he behaves in a more integrated and principled way throughout his life, he can be happier. But it will take a lot on his own. He also realizes he had been thinking about love and sex in a very odd way. He had been thinking of them as being mostly separate, and his desire for Dagny initially he thought it was mainly physical. But he starts to realize that's not true at all. It wasn't just the fact that she's beautiful, it's the fact that she is the kind of person that he wants to be around, the kind of person he thinks is a good moral person. The big climax for their relationship and for Hank is, as a result of the government blackmail, Hank was about to give up the property rights to his metal. Otherwise, the government were going to make their affair public. And this is the 1950s, so for a woman, that's reputation ruin. And Dagny says, I don't care. I will make it, and she goes and makes it public without Hank intervening. In the process, he realizes that Dagny has met someone else, and so he has this conversation with Dagny in which he lets her go and integrates all of these lessons he's been learning from his time with her, from Francisco, from his battles with the government, from thinking through his values and what they actually could look like in his life. He also, around the same time, cuts off his family, realizes that they are completely in the wrong for hating him and verbally abusing him while depending on him. So he integrates these lessons about love and justice, and he comes out very content and proud. And he has this whole conversation with Dagny about it, which is well worth reading in its entirety, but I will just read you a couple of little snippets so you can get a sense for what he was talking about. He says to Dagny, I love you as the same value, as the same expression, with the same pride and the same meaning as my work. As the shape of my world, as my best mirror. I who took pride in my ability to achieve the satisfaction of my desires, let them prescribe the code of values by which I judged my desires. So we have here both the elements of applying what he'd been applying in one field to what he'd been applying, sorry, I keep moving this, to what he'd been, where he hadn't been applying it before, integrating those, becoming one full person who consistently acts on his values, and appreciating that you can appreciate the same most fundamental, most core values in work, in a challenge, in an opportunity, and in a person. And that he shouldn't be letting other people prescribe his values. He has the mind to think for himself, and he can do that as well in ethics as he can in steelmaking. The resurrection, the final attempt from the government to stop him from being the amazing person that he is, was the government actually sent agents to attack his most important steel mill. And he realizes through this attack that he's oddly calm during this attack. And it's because he realizes that although the government can take specific things from him, they can take a mill, they can take a particular, they can even take a particular person, although that's obviously very painful, they can't take the source of those things. They can't take him, his mind, his values, his most important elements of his person. I won't tell you the rest of his story, that's very near the end, but it does end up very well for him. As I mentioned before, the theme of Atlas Shrugged is the role of man's mind in existence, and what Hank is learning is to apply his mind to the personal realm. He'd been applying it at work, and that's why he'd been so successful. He hadn't been applying it with his family, with his romantic relationships, and as he learns that he needs to if he wants to be an integrated person, if he wants to have that integrity, if he wants to have a life in which morality is not this duty forced upon him, but the means by which he lives and thrives. The push toward him learning this lesson is the government and the people who are in line with the government. This would include his wife and his brother. And the pull were his mentors, Francisco and Dagny, the people who were showing him another way. And again, like Africa mentioned in the lecture before, they weren't preaching at him. They were appreciating him, they were connecting with him, and they were models. And so his main opportunities there were meeting Francisco, having the relationship with Dagny, getting to observe and interact with these people and connect with them in a way he had never really connected with people before. Finally, Neville Longbottom. When we meet Neville, he's a shy, poor, clumsy little boy. Not financially poor, but you feel bad for him. He has been raised by a very strict grandmother who has high expectations of him and who kind of scares him a little bit. His family worry that he is not actually magical, and this is a huge taboo or stigma in the magical world. So he comes to Hogwarts, the school for wizards, afraid, unconfident, and particularly afraid that he doesn't belong there, that he doesn't have a place in the magical world, that he can't do it. But he tries anyway. For the first couple years, we see him trying. We see him standing up for himself and sticking to his values in small, quiet ways. But what really kicks off, I think, the core of his character arc happens in the fourth book or movie. In this story, we have a rather intense, questionable kind of teacher come to teach them the defense against the dark arts. And this teacher, Professor Moody, shows them the torture curse. And this is significant to Neville because the reason he's been raised by his grandparents is because his parents were tortured into insanity by the followers of the villain of the story, Voldemort, the Dark Lord, etc. Seeing what happened to his parents in the form of, it was a spider they'd used in the class to demonstrate, absolutely terrifies Neville. But it also makes him realize, I have no way to stop the people who are doing this at the moment. And that, I think, is the catalyst for him really starting to take seriously that magic isn't just about, being accepted or having friends. Magic is a way to defend what I care about. But he really puts that into action in the next story, when Bellatrix Lestrange, who was the lead torturer of his parents, escapes from prison. And now he really is focused. He's really determined. He's also a little bit angry. Understandably, this was the woman who took his parents from him effectively, gave them a fate that was, in some senses, worse than death. And so her escape gives him the purpose, and what he does with that purpose is he works really, really, really hard. He'd already joined a group that was studying defense against the dark arts. They call it Dumbledore's Army. They were already preparing to defend themselves against the Dark Lord and his followers, but now he really commits. He works harder than anyone has ever seen him work. And I think the reason, what's going on with him internally is before he had been driven by fear. He'd been afraid of screwing up. He'd been afraid of making mistakes. Now he's driven by purpose. He has something he cares about that he's working towards, and he starts to succeed. This isn't the photo, I'll show you later. He starts to succeed, and you see these people supporting him. He has Harry and the other members of Dumbledore's army who are cheering him on, giving him advice. They're just really being his best allies and his mentors. And he has an opportunity finally to use the training at the end of the fifth book. And Harry initially doesn't want to bring him along because he kind of still thinks of Neville as this, not that good at magic, kind of clumsy, forgetful boy. But Neville says, no, all this training was supposed to be about fighting you-know-who, wasn't it? This is the first chance we've had to do something real. He doesn't want to just have the skills, he wants to use them. And so he does go to the Ministry. He does fight the Death Eaters, the followers of the Dark Lord. He defends his friends. You can see Luna in the background here. He's scared. He's never faced these kinds of people before, these people who are brutal torturers and murderers. But he does what he needs to do in order to defend his friends and keep everyone safe. And so he becomes more of a hero. He knows he belongs in this world now. He knows that he has the right to be in the Wizarding World and that he belongs at Hogwarts. And so later in the series, when the Dark Lord has taken over Hogwarts, Neville leads the student rebellion. He leads the resistance. He's now putting to work his courage and his skills when there are people in Hogwarts who are torturing people and hurting other people, and he stands up for those who will not stand up for themselves, and he mentors them and teaches them the skills that he needed to learn. And finally, Neville has the chance to, you can't see it very well, this is Voldemort's snake. He needs to be killed in order for Voldemort to be defeated, and Neville is the one who does it. And he stands up right in front of Voldemort, in front of everyone, and kills Nagini. This is him at the end. This is his transformed state. He is now brave, courageous, and standing up for what he loves, and is not just a member of the Wizarding World, he is a hero of it. So I think overall the theme of Harry Potter is the power of love. There are different kinds of love that we see throughout the series. Familial love, romantic love, love between friends. And Neville's lesson is to learn to defend what you love. That it's not just enough to love those things, you have to stand up for them. His push is wanting to be prepared and perhaps even to avenge his parents against Voldemort's followers. And his pull is the support and friendship of the DA. This is the photo I was talking about earlier. I'll move to the other side. Where Neville has been working on this spell for weeks and weeks and weeks, and he finally gets it right. And you can see how happy everyone is for him. They're all genuinely cheering him on. This support, this friendship was his pull factor. And his opportunities for becoming the kind of person that he wanted to be and the kind of wizard he wanted to be were Dumbledore's armies, the study group in the first case and the student rebellion in the second case. And he sees those opportunities with both hands, as it were. So now that we've seen some examples, now that we fully understand, I hope, the structure of the character arc and what it looks like, I wanted to just wrap up with a few thoughts about how you can apply this to your own life. The first thing, like I said, the specific lessons. All of the lessons that those characters learned are things that would help you in your own life. If you may already be great at those things, I don't know. But they're things that are worth remembering, they're things that are worth trying to apply, there are things that are worth thinking about. I also want you to start thinking about, or I would encourage you to start thinking about the things in your life that might be part of a character arc, that you can choose to make part of a character arc. Looking out for challenges that are not that if you try, they're not just things you have to get through. They're an opportunity to embody something that you care about, or to try to embody a new thing that maybe isn't your strong point. Looking out for allies and mentors. One thing that really stood out to me as I was preparing this presentation is how much of a role other people played. And it wasn't usually the teachers or the parents or the authority figures telling people what to do. It was the friends who were supporting, the romantic partner, the people that you had an opportunity to learn from who were somewhat on your level in a certain sense. Look out for those allies and mentors. They can be so, so powerful. Look out for the push-pull factors as well. The negative things, the problems that you're facing may be, especially if there's a similarity among them, they may be trying to nudge you towards learning something. Not that there's actually a purpose to this, but if you look at them, you can look at them as nudging you toward improving your life. And the pull factors, the things that if perhaps you made certain changes, you might be able to enjoy and appreciate. I already said learn from others. Look for opportunities. What are the possibilities that you might have to learn something new, to meet new people, to perhaps try and apply things to excel in ways that you haven't done before? I bet if you start looking, you will start to see them more and more and more. And most importantly, I think this is really about reframing challenges. It's about seeing struggles not as just something that is inevitably there, life is suffering and pain, and you just get through it as best you can. No, challenges are opportunities for you to decide, I'm going to become the kind of person who can deal with this. And if you do that over and over again, I think you'll start to see that you do build up that kind of ability. You do start to become the hero of your own life. So thank you so much. I really enjoy pulling these kinds of ideas out of fiction, and I really enjoy all of these stories. I write about them, I make videos about them, I'm on TikTok and Instagram about them for my sins. I would love for you to join me in any of those places, but now I would love to take your questions. I think we have about 13, 14 minutes to do so.